Welcome to the Liberation Assembly. I know I got a minute before showtime, but I'm deliberately coming in a little early because, as I'm finding, do you know that you actually can't teach or impart any knowledge if you can't study? It actually leaves you aware of just how little you know when you presume to attempt to teach. So don't worry. I found myself still busy clarifying my thoughts and reading up until the last minute before coming on, almost like you guys are my examiners. Anyway, good morning, guys. Oh, sorry. When I say guys, I've included you ladies as well. Ikaro in Yoa. That's good morning in Yoruba. Wherever you may be joining us from, it's good to have you. Old friend Shola and that guy Shola, we were in Fidelity together, so people know my classmates. One of them is on is on the show with us. Known the guy since 1978 when we were in Form 1, September 78. So it's pretty easy when you have some history. So good morning, everyone. So that let's get into it. It's a brand new week, but the week that was the one that just passed. And you know the way we do it. We talk about the week that was as a window into the country inhabited by me and you, the country that we've managed to build or failed to build. There was one incident in the week that was that addressed, or in some way addressed the part of something that had been brewing on my mind for a while. And you must know by now that whilst I may speak in categorical terms, I actually allow my thoughts to percolate for a season before expressing them. I'm not as spontaneous as some of you have led yourselves to believe. I actually speak only after having convinced myself about the correctness of what I have concluded. And what has happened is that in the week that was, I ran into a release by a gentleman known as Mike Achimogo. He was upbraiding Air Maroc, an airline that I have only ever heard bad things about. Everybody I know who has taken Air Maroc had some bad experience or the other with them. So Achimogo was addressing Air Maroc, and in saying so, he quoted something that the country manager, Ahmed Boussouf, was said to have said. He said, Ahmed said, in response to all the demands that Air Maroc should treat Nigerians better and be so wicked in his treatment of Nigerians. And the country manager said, well, whatever you want to do, do. As in, go do your worst. We're not changing. Can do whatever you care. This was what Ahmed Boussouf was said to have said in response to summons by the Civil Aviation Authority of Nigeria. So Achimogo was talking, and then he said something, and I lifted the quote directly from his statement. I have it, and I'm reading directly from what I wrote down. The NCAA, I'm quoting him now, the NCAA under Tinubu Keyamo and the DG, Chris Najomo, DG Civil Aviation, Chris Najomo, will never be diminished to such a level of brazen disregard and non-compliance. That sounds to me pretty much like impotent willy waving. What was with the willy waving? You want to sanction the airline, sanction the airline. But here is the window that he opened. Have you noticed that when our president attends functions abroad, he tends to slink into the background almost as if he's not there? It's almost as if Nigeria has become a country that is afraid to be heard. We have no powers to assert any longer. Yorubas have a proverb. They say, "Kì í tán lára ọmọ ọba kó má kú dànsákì." even when it seems like the royalty is no more, there must be some measure of regality, you should be left with some respect. We have become so disrespected that all the NCAA could do was to be doing impotent willy waving with Ahmed Boussouf, who said, whatever you want to do, do. Don't we have some protocol by which we deal with these things? Don't we have set of rules? Do we not have guidelines? But I guess in a place where anything goes, everything also goes, including respect for us as a country. If Nigeria will be subsumed, then what will happen under Tinubu, Keyamo, and the DG of NCA? It gives you an idea of exactly where we are. But don't take my word. In the week that was, 24 farmers were killed in Zamfara on Wednesday on their own farm, on their farms. They were murdered on their farm, right there in Zamfara State. They were on their farms. Let me make them, let's understand something. Aside from the fact that I'll speak to these when we're dealing with the uncritical disconnect, think about it. Farmer on his farm. We're not talking about the Fulani herdsman attacking the farmer in Benue now. We're not talking about the Fulani herdsman attacking the farmer in Ugeli, in Orire local government, or anywhere. We're talking about farmers in Zamfara on their farms. We're not talking about people with tractors. We're talking about persons engaged essentially in subsistence farming. Maybe they will sell the excess of their crop in the local farmers market and he'll find his way in some form of collectives to the south. But at the end of the day, the only reason why poverty has been more or less alien in the north is because the people generally have the capacity to farm, if nothing else. So they might not have cash, but they would always have food. Now we're dealing with a situation where farmers going to their farms, and I can assure you that that will be a fallout of their perhaps failure to pay a tax imposed by terrorists, or maybe the terrorists are gearing up to start imposing taxes on those living in that community. This is Nigeria. That is a window into how fragile life has become. Remember when they talk about the social contract, the first foundational basis for the evolution of the state is the protection of lives and property. But farmers went to their farm and they got killed. 24 in one day. And the country has continued like nothing has happened. And you know why? Because that's all you heard. There must be multiple more that have not been reported, that have been caught in the censorship net. Most of the censorship, mind you, is not necessarily state imposed. But when you look at the ownership of the press, the compromise of the journalists, you understand the censorship that has crept in, which means that you do not even hear what is happening. News is buried. But that came out, 24 farmers in Zamfara in the week that was. Let that tell you the state of the country that you and I live in. And then there was the account of Mr. Olatunde, one of the teachers who survived the Oriri attack. He was interviewed and I was watching the interview. And he spoke of how he might have escaped capture if it wasn't for the arthritis he had in his leg. But he couldn't run because of the arthritis that he had in his leg. And then when he was captured, And the Fulani terrorist who had him gave him some medicine. He didn't say what medicine. He said they gave him some medicine and it cured his pain. The arthritic pain that he had been managing for weeks, according to him, disappeared with a single dosage of whatever it was that he was given by his abductors. Now, here is where it gets interesting. In that same week, the NDLEA was busy parading multiple cartons of tramadol that they had captured on his way to some part of northern Nigeria. And then it struck me. Mr. Olatunde must have been given a dose of tramadol by those who captured him. And crazy as it might sound, in the midst of all of what happened to Mr. Olatunde, the unfortunate murder of two of his colleagues, the intolerable suffering that they might have gone through, there was actually a reason to chuckle in the week that was. Mr. Olatunde must have been given a dose of the terrorist tramadol that they obviously carry around so that they may function in the inhuman condition that they exist in before they themselves must have become as inhumane as they have become. And then in the week that was, it moved from the sublime to the ridiculous. You know what happened? Not that I was surprised, but I saw a video. I didn't bother to watch most of it. I saw the commentary under it of the simpleton known as Similari Fubara endorsing Wike's new puppet in Rivers State and pledging his allegiance to the collective that had brought him to power. The only reason I'm going to speak to it is so that I might at least, I want to gloat. Allow me the pleasure of gloating. I told you, Lord, the minute the schism developed between simpleton and wicked, and you guys were busy trying to adopt the simpleton, I warned you, do not get involved in their war. Your enemy's enemy is not your friend, is your enemy's enemy. And at the end of the day, Similari knew all along that he won no mandate. He didn't have the people behind him. He didn't have a clue as to how to serve the people. He was beholden to Wike for the power that were entrusted to him. He knew the consequences of breaching the agreement, and the capo di tutti di capi sat inside the rock in Aso obviously made it very clear. Agreement na agreement. So they managed the situation for a season. But the question is this, and this is where the window becomes important. Exactly how have the people benefited from the battles that raged between Wike and the simpleton? The destruction that they wrought in rivers, the complete absence of governance that you witnessed. What is it that the wicked clown that will be coming after simpleton, what would he be telling the people that would make him believe that he is deserving of being given power? And then the question is this: what difference would it make what the people think in this democracy that we have evolved? What difference would it make? These are the critical questions we should all ask ourselves as we laugh over all these things that are happening around us. Because even as we laugh in the uncritical disconnect, because we disconnect ourselves from these things as though we are unaffected by them, when in reality, we are the true victims of all the shenanigans that I just highlighted for you. We are the true victims, me and you. The difference between myself and most of those who are watching or who come across this is the degree of awareness as to what we're dealing with. I am very much aware of the fact that there is a battle going on for the soul of this country. Those who should be fighting for it are disengaged from that fight. That is the connect that we have to start making. Well, before I leave this segment, I must acknowledge the life and time of a dearly departed gentleman, Adetunji Ogunwusi. He passed on in the week that was. Adetunji Ogunwusi was first my client. And then he became a benefactor. That is when a client pays you beyond your wage. And then he became my friend. And then Adetunji Ogunwusi became my brother. He passed on in the week that was. His story is not mine to tell, but I know that history will tell his story. May God rest the soul of Adetunji Ogunwusi. He was a good man. He wasn't a perfect man. I'm not. But Adetunji Ogunwusi was a good man. Nigeria is rendered a lot more impoverished by the departure of such men. May God rest his soul. And before I jump into my lecture, I see what a friend just popped up on the screen, that I'm not saying anything about the NBA election. What am I supposed to say? What do you want me to say? The NBA did not begin its descent into the abyss with the last election. In fact, AFAM was something of an aberration that he was involved or interested in what was happening in the public space. But I'm willing to keep an open mind and watch the lady gentleman either prove her critics right or wrong. I have no opinion on this subject. I have no expectation of the NBA. It's up to them. So, good morning to those of you who are just joining us. I want to speak particularly to a subject this morning. I have titled it The Uncritical Disconnect. But even though I have titled it A Disconnect, and I titled the disconnect Uncritical, the conventional terminology is actually the critical disconnect. But I have used the word uncritical because I have seen persons who you would ordinarily expect to know better uncritically become critically disconnected from the issue. They bemoan what they have endorsed. Let me share an anecdote, which is based on a fact. Actually, I was zooming around on social media a couple of days back, and I came across one of my friends in the Revolution Now, Keda, and he had this reggae artist who had a cutlass in his hand, and he was singing about how Tinubu came to power, how Tinubu rigged his way to power, how the judiciary endorsed the electoral heist. The guy had a lot of, this reggae musician had a lot to say about the fraudulent emergence of Tinubu in power. And as I was listening to the lyrics of this reggae act, a Nigerian reggae act, as I was listening to the lyrics, the guy was asking questions related to Tinubu's pedigree, education, history, parentage, all the usual questions that we all asked about Tinubu. But he then began to question the credibility of the election, the credibility of the judiciary, and I was like, oh, wow. All the time that we were busy drawing attention to all this fraudulence about the electoral process. The person who made this post was busy attacking the claim by the obedient, by Peter Obi, by myself, about the fraudulence of that election. One of these persons actually celebrated Tinubu's emergence and posted a picture of himself, claiming that he was waiting at the embassy for Dele Farotimi to go on exile so that they will live together. Now, this person, just 3 years down the line, has forgotten that because of his own subjectivization of the truth, the selective nature of the truth that they admitted to and told in that season, the capacity of persons to confront the evil was diminished because we couldn't build a united front, because persons who should be outraged about the subversion of the system were more focused on drawing joy from the evil that had been done to those they considered enemies, opponents. Fleeting moment in time when we could all have agreed on what evil is, unequivocally became lost in the partisanship of the moment. That's just the way it is. These are not persons that you can claim are uncritical. These are critical minds. And these critical minds fail to make the connection between the evil they tolerated, endorsed, and what is happening in their current realities. It was a wise man who once said, I don't know now, I don't bother keeping some of those things in mind. This wise man says that if you would fight only for the right of those you agree with, you love, you've fought for nothing until you begin to fight for the right of those you disagree with, in spite of your disagreement, in the understanding that the totality of their humanity and yours is just one. You create a standard for their treatment, the same standard is legitimized against you, and you lose your credibility and capacity to say anything against what you had tolerated when it was convenient for you to tolerate it. This is how Nigerians have become uncritically disconnected from the cause and the effect of what is happening in our space. Let me give you some contextual understanding of my argument this morning. We have spoken, if it was just last week or the week before that I spoke about, it was last week, the alien state. And I have spoken also to the fact that we are being ruled by strangers. Now, here is the critical connection that you have to make in this uncritical disconnect. The critical connection you have to make is this. Whilst the rulers are rendered as strangers by the structural deficiencies or design intentions of the Nigerian state, the ruled, who are the ones who have become victims instead of citizens, have equally become strangers because they are no longer related to the issues. They've removed themselves. So there is a critical disconnect, and this critical disconnect is engendered by multiple factors. Let's look at one, a detachment from the subject, which renders every interpretation subjective. Let me explain myself. How do you begin to demand that the baboon feel the pain of the monkey who is having direct pains? It's not his business. He has no relation to the monkey. The baboon is the baboon, the monkey is the monkey. And what has happened is that those who rule Nigeria are divorced from those they rule. Whilst those who rule Nigeria are divorced from those they rule, those who are being ruled have equally divorced themselves from the entity called Nigeria. So the social compact is broken. The social compact is the one that has a state that has a duty to protect those who are living within its borders. And whilst protecting those living within its borders, there is a financial commitment called taxation that the people living within the borders equally pay in expectation of social services in addition to the protection that is meant to be offered by the state. In the case of the Nigerian, because this fundamental principle has been observed more in breach than in observance, the state has completely taken its hand off governance to the point where it has abandoned its responsibility as the protector of those living within its borders. In the week that was, I just explained, and I'll use that example now. 24 human beings, 24 human beings, farmers, were murdered on their farms in Zamfara on Wednesday last week. Where is the Nigerian state? But how do I ask for the Nigerian state when the same Nigerian state is completely incapable of protecting its own soldiers? Generals are being killed, abducted. If we say that one is retired, what about the brigadier general? In fact, two of them, Momo, no. Brimer, Brigadier General Brimer was the last one. And then there was another one before him, Uba or something like that, who was abducted, who escaped his abductors, and the Nigerian state still failed him and he was killed and murdered on camera. At the end of the day, if the rulers profit by their detachment, what do we say about the victims who have detached themselves, further deepening their own victimization? Let me show you. When you endorse evil, understand that you are no different from the man who is stood right at the beach, peeing away on the crab. When the wind changes direction, that weed that is falling on top of the crab might very well be splashing your midriff. And this is part of the reason why when you detach yourself, you also victimize yourself. Let's talk about our brother El-Rufai. El-Rufai was executive governor of a state. Before then, he was minister. He rode roughshod. He knew nothing about judicial accounting. He would have court orders demanding that a place be preserved. He ordered the demolition when he was minister. As governor, human beings were disappearing. He spoke about human beings as though they were dispensable. He disconnected himself from the issue and he was busy erecting a system, sustaining a system built of injustice and inequity. Today, where is El-Rufai? Judicially in Nigeria today, El-Rufai is a hostage of the Nigerian state. Just as the children who are in Orire were hostages of terrorists, El-Rufai is today hostage of the Nigerian state because he was not connected. If he had believed himself connected, if he had understood that he was sustaining a system that one day come back to bite him, perhaps El-Rufai would have been more circumspect about supporting, sustaining, and perpetrating injustice when he was in power. But today he's out of power. Where is he today? Judicially captured, a hostage of the same power that he helped to sustain. You may begin to wonder, where is the relevance? I'll show you. It's a critical disconnect. And I'll show you the disconnect even further. Obasanjo, he will write letters. He will speak against evil. He's been particularly trenchant in speaking against evil since he left office. In fact, Obasanjo began to speak like a revolutionary in the last 5 years or so. The more Nigeria became merged in the Buhari mess, the more Obasanjo began to speak in nationalist terms, like a revolutionary too, in recognition of the evil that has overtaken Nigeria. But here is the question. Why are his words as impotent as they are? Because there is a critical disconnect. What did he do when he was in power? What kind of example did he lay as president? What did he do with power as president? What credibility does his words have? There is a critical disconnect. If you are going to be able to intervene, you must always understand that there is cause and there is effect. If you have been at the forefront of building a system that runs on impunity, you as president, for 11 years, both as military president and as civilian president, Obasanjo exemplified impunity. You may say that he wasn't as uncouth as the ones who are there today, but the reality remains the same. You run a system on impunity, you cannot turn around with any credibility. The truth is not devalued even in the mouth of a liar, but credibility matters when you're speaking to national issues. This critical disconnect affects the way we have built a country. When you saw me tearing up after my release, it was because I found in my lifetime that Nigerians could agree, could connect themselves to an issue, to injustice, to fight against it in the manner in which you did. That critical disconnect, we found a way. You found a way somehow to bridge it, and you spoke as one. It wasn't anything that I had to say. The evidence has never mattered to them. Nobody has ever bothered to demand that I substantiate if they don't believe anything that I said in my book. But the truth didn't matter. But you mattered because you ensured that that critical disconnect was bridged. Bridging that critical disconnect ensured that your energies could be concerted and your demands could be effective. If you had not concerted your energies, if you allowed yourself to subjectify the truth, which is the basis upon which you find the grace to at any point in time disconnect yourself from what affects you, it is in the subjectivization of the truth that you've disconnected yourselves. If you had found enough persons who are like, it's a Yoruba man, waiting concern me, or my lawyers them now, waiting be my own, or as even some senior advocates shamelessly came to advocate, it's a matter for the courts. Matter for the courts. Look at what the courts have done to El-Rufai. But you didn't allow that to happen to me. Those are the reasons why you saw me tearing up. There's something I say all the time. When you see something going wrong, you have one of two duties. And you cannot perform either of these duties and be disconnected from what is happening around. That critical disconnect cannot happen to you if you do one of two things when you are confronted with a problem. You are either going to play God or you are going to play dog. You play God when you positively affect the situation on your own. Singularly, you are able to bring about the desired change, solve the problem. That capacity is what has you playing God, small g, even though he's enough on his own. But when you can't play God, you can play dog. You, a human being, can play dog. How do you play dog? You draw attention to the issue. The only way you draw attention to the issue is because you're connected to the issue. Your connection to the issue renders you incapable of walking away from it, even though you could not change it on your own. So you draw attention to it. Either tell other people who may do something about it, or even though they say you are wailing impotently, as I am, do your own. Say your piece. Because at the end of the day, you are either a victim or you are an accomplice in your own victimization. Which one are you? Religion is at the root of this disconnect as well. Let me explain. Those of you who have listened to me for any length of time, you're familiar with my views on religion. I was born a Christian. The only way I know how to approach God is as a Christian. But I have zero problem with anybody else who approaches God in however they care. God has never told me what his religion is, and he has never failed to answer me when I have pled before him. He's never also bothered to give me detailed instruction of whether it's feminine or masculine. But I feel comfortable approaching him as I have learnt from my youth. And he has also never told me, don't approach me in that fashion. And he has not prescribed to me how he wants another person to approach him. So I have no business with your own religion as long as you leave me alone with my religion or lack of religion. Now, why is this important? The first thing you need to understand about religion is that religion is essentially man's way of structuring relationship with God and ordering morality as a way of evolving systems so that a society may be ruled based on the perception of men. Now, if you took the word itself, religion, and you look to the etymology, because I'm saying this because it offers you an opportunity to understand how religion has led to the disconnect, the critical disconnect within the Nigerian state. Religion itself comes from the Latin word religio, or you go to the Old French, religare. It means to bind. But what is religion binding? Religion is binding the mind. It binds imagination. It binds the capacity to think outside of prescribed pathways. But that on its own is not a problem. But where it has become a problem in Nigeria is that you have charlatans presiding over religious orders in Nigeria, men who have limited imagination and sees religion essentially strictly from the mercantile standpoint, so that they control the people, maximally extract value out of them in the name of God. So you find men who have built extremely good environments, cities in some cases, off hard work, strategic planning, asking us to pray in relation to the outcome of things affecting our country. They didn't pray to build beautiful churches, beautiful mosques. Yes, they prayed, but they worked. They had strategies for fundraising, they had strategies for procurement, they had strategies for construction, they had strategies for management. Exemplary in most cases, and they've executed. But they'll tell you, pray for Nigeria. They'll tell you, our problems are spiritual. You need to fast and pray. So instead of connecting their flock to the issue and demanding that men use the God-given brains that they have been blessed with, they disconnect the people by fraudulently demanding that what is completely human, the failure of human beings to do justice and to be equitable in their dealings, they ask you to pray. Pray. A fool with a plan will better the genius without one. These men, in some cases, PhD holders, they cannot be said not to know better, but they profit by a continuation and perpetuation of this system that renders the people susceptible to spiritual merchandising and that renders the church and the mosque as merchants of hope, peddlers of illusion. Instead of concerting the energy of the people to confront the evil that has overtaken them, they turn everybody into suppliant slaves in the name of God. They preach salvation to the dead. They demand peace of the oppressed. They disconnect the people from the issues facing them. You promise them virgins in heaven, whilst guaranteeing them hell on earth. Alex Onye, if you give Alex the budget that is given for churches and mosques, the STEM education in Nigeria will be revolutionized. He's doing so much with so little because he has a clear vision as to what he's looking to achieve. He is connected. He can feel the pains of the children whose lives he has sought to elevate. But the allergy is ruling us. Feel nobody's pain. But if they don't feel it, what about you who are the victims? Why are you disconnected from the system that is victimizing you? How? How? Let us be clear about something. You have no expectation of persons whose evil should be clear to you, because this is not about incompetence. Please, $16 billion does not guarantee darkness except it is by design. If it is not by design, you do not spend $16 billion without electricity. There have been multiple occasions when you and I have sat here and you have heard my energy alarm going off, and we are still here. They justified the removal of subsidy by citing the multiple fraud that attended the administration of the subsidy regime. How many people have been prosecuted? How much have been recovered? They told you they recovered so much money from Malami. How many months in prison? How many years has he been sentenced to spend in prison? Was he the only one who did this stealing? Why are we not asking these questions? Somebody became the chairman of a non-existent agency that was inside the budget, that had offices and staff in the federal secretariat, and we're all going on like nothing has happened. Disconnect. I sit down in my house here in Lekki, in Lagos, and I see events happening in Iran, in the Middle East. I see Brent crude climbing above $100. I see 2 critical shipping lanes closed off. I'm already thinking, how is this going to affect my bottom line? I'm connected because I know that everything is interconnected, and what is happening there would affect me here. And you are here. All of you, you've managed to detach yourselves from what is going on all around you. And you do not even realize how detached you have become. And at the root of your detachment is the subjectivization of the truth. If it happens to Mr. A, it's bad. But when it happens to Mr. B, it's acceptable. Is Mr. B now? Is Igbo? Or is Yoruba? Now Muslim. We were celebrating the release of the children in Orire. There are communities where hundreds have been abducted. Hundreds abducted. Orire, we thank God. But why did one attract condemnation, but the other barely a whimper? Why? I would explain myself. You see, we must understand, and it took my brother Lasisi Olagunju to further highlight this point. When Orire happened, you found widespread condemnation across the southern part. These, of course, became nationalized and the matter was internationalized. But the noise started from where it happened. Everybody else amplified it because those to whom it happened did not find any basis upon which to tolerate what happened. It was deemed an abomination to them. And because they deemed it an abomination, their neighbors, everybody joined them in amplifying the demand for the release of these children. A society found nothing wrong with the lynching of a human being on the basis of unsubstantiated claims of blasphemy on a class WhatsApp group. They found it so unobjectionable that members of the community rose in defense of the murderer. They tolerated it. They justified it. The life of that lady became expendable because of the acceptance of bigotry and hatred. These are replicated across the length and breadth of Nigeria on a daily basis. People have found reasons upon which to subjectify the truth, upon which to discount the totality of the person's humanity, and then avoid feeling the pain that has been inflicted on these persons. You see, when a country is designed and structured for extraction of wealth, not creation of wealth, extraction, you find what is happening in Nigeria. The totality of the state is not a focus on bettering the lives of the people within its territory. Is not about protecting them. It is not, if it were to be like that, you wouldn't have only one functional refinery in Nigeria. Every university in Nigeria should be teaching things related to petroleum engineering, mining, and all of that. It should never have been that Nigeria has become all they do in this country is take out the raw material without creation of additional value. In failing to create additional value, what you have done is that you are continually pauperizing the people living within the space, and the people living within the space continue to create avenues to minimize their pain. And in creating avenues for minimization of pain, the reality in Nigeria is that the people have become disconnected from the country itself. And this uncritical disconnect is what you are seeing every day, manifesting in what we call Japa. It's disconnecting. There is nothing more disconnecting than to Japa, run away, flee. And every day you see the Nigerian middle class running as fast as it can. Where it chooses not to run, its children are sent abroad. The country dying because men, young blood, are disconnecting themselves from it. This critical disconnect, you find it manifested in the mentality of the middle class, the existential focus of the people themselves, and is all found in the alien root of the state. I sit down sometime and I marvel. There is a friend of mine who passed away maybe about a couple of months ago. We were in university together. He lived in England with his family, a rabid Tinubu supporter, an ace Yoruba Kponu activist. And one day he was lamenting to me, he was lamenting the racism of his English, or shall I say British host. And I laughed. That's why I was laughing, and I explained to him, why are you failing to make the critical connection? You, a Nigerian, cannot abide members of other ethnic nationalities, and you believe that they should be justifiably marginalized in your own part of the country, but you expect the British to open their doors and to hug you and welcome you. You fail to understand that if you had created an environment such as the one you are demanding that the British should hand to you in your own country, you will not have left that country in the first place. This critical disconnect that I see manifesting almost everywhere I turn is crazy. It's crazy. We sit down and we talk about 30 million children out of school. What we fail to connect is that this is one of the reasons why it is very easy for terrorism, Islamist terrorism, to fester, Fulani banditry to multiply. If you have failed to build any industry that creates value, if you keep extracting instead of retaining the value, you know, when we keep using all these dogonturenchi and we talk extractive, this one, it becomes difficult for you to make the connection. Let me break it down for you. I sell foodstuffs. At least my wife runs a store that sells food, raw food stuff. Now, if you took, and we also sell the cooked one. So if you took a tuber of yam and you sold it for 1,000 naira, that's it, it's gone. But if you took that yam and you dice it up and you fry it and you sold fried yam, you probably make about 4,000 naira instead of the 1,000 naira. You create activities that extract maximum value, and you also take more value, creating more wealth. Let's take that to any product made in Nigeria, or rather, produced in Nigeria, mined from Nigeria. Let's start with the one you all know, crude oil. So you extract crude. That barrel of crude is the basis for the production of probably over 50 different products. You manufacture those things directly from the byproduct after you've taken your crude, after you've taken your diesel, after you've taken your petrol, your kerosene. There are multiple other things that you take out of that crude oil. Unfortunately for us, we simply ship the crude. We even lost the capacity to refine, in spite of the fact that people have profited and enriched themselves by destroying our local refining capacity for their own selfish reasons. The critical disconnect made it impossible for people to see what they have done to themselves. Today, we produce crude. We add no value. Even the crude we produce, is of no benefit to us. It has destroyed our environment, particularly in the South. However much they might give to Tanteta, it has not repaired the environment that has been destroyed by crude extraction. And in spite of all these extraction, me and you are still paying the market price of petrol, in spite of the fact that they keep lying that they have taken away subsidy, they are still paying themselves the subsidy. Subsidy is gone, justified by saying there will be more money for development. The evidence shows the exact opposite. But the people are disconnected. You have gold. You don't even have gold refining capacity. You ship your gold to Dubai, which produces little or no gold, but today processes more gold than a lot of countries that have gold in their country. What have you done with it? The disconnect is what has led us to where we are. We did not get here by accident. The lecturer who trades his marks but complains about the quality of graduates, what did you expect? Exactly what were you expecting? What were you expecting? The law does not rule and you profited by it. Because, of course, the DPO is your friend. And you could call the DPO to help you arrest that person that you do not like. How do you go about the business of lamenting when the same impunity is directed at you? The reality is very simple. If you subjectify the truth to the point where you detach yourself from what is going on around you, or if you are so focused on surviving that you have left the Nigerian state to his own device and you have abandoned governance and the process to evil men, you've become critically disconnected from your own victimization. What does it profit you? What does it profit you? Seed time and harvest time. What you plant is what you will reap. This uncritical disconnect that has left a lot of us feeling like it's none of our business, Joe. NEPA is dying. I have generator. There is no public water system. I have my own bowl. Insecurity. I have my dog. Beware of dog. And in any case, I have my shakabula. This uncritical disconnect has left all of us susceptible to victimization. Because if we connect ourselves to the issues, if we become related to the pains of our neighbors, if we would understand the fact that our silence renders us complicit and it legitimizes what would happen to us if we tolerated it whilst it happened to another. You need to critically reconnect yourself. Critically reconnect yourself. The evil you tolerate in relation to Mr. A is legitimized in relation to you. Reconnect yourselves to the issue. If your rulers are allergies, understandably so, they benefit from the system. What is your own excuse for rendering yourself an allergy? They benefit. I can understand those of you who have jackpot, and I see you asking if I'm in England. I'm not in England. I just live in a jungle in Lekki. The reality of the matter is that you have to reconnect yourselves with the issues if anything is going to change. At the base minimum, you have to reconnect yourselves. I just came by this week. to point out to you that uncritical disconnect is strengthening the chains of oppression. Reconnect yourself. Taste your words before you speak them. Prick yourself with the pain that you are prescribing for your mate. That reconnects you and perhaps might be enough to save all of us. I will see you next week. Stay alive. Stay alive, but reconnect yourselves. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your week.